Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle Purdy, and I'm a program associate with the Electrification Coalition. I'm excited to welcome you to the Electrification Coalition's infrastructure webinar series. Our topic today will be on electric school buses. Each day, more than 20 million American students ride a bus to school, and nearly all of these buses run on diesel, emitting dangerous exhaust that our children breathe. By transitioning to electric school buses, our kids will breathe easier, schools can achieve significant cost savings, and we can power our vehicles with domestically produced clean electricity. Today, we're going to hear from four wonderful speakers who will speak about different aspects of the electric school bus experience. Emily Pape, the Senior Program Associate of the Electrification Coalition, will walk us through state and federal funding opportunities. Kyriakos Anastasopoulos, the Senior Programs Manager from ComEd, will share the utilities perspective. Jane Israel, the Senior Western Regional Manager of Highland Electric Fleets, will explain how to succeed in the procurement process. And Kenny Jean Schrader, the Transportation Director for Three Rivers Community Schools in Michigan, will teach us about lessons learned and best practices for deploying electric school bus fleets. Each presentation will take 10 to 15 minutes. We are recording this webinar, so look out for the link that we will be emailing you in a few days. We will have some time at the end for questions, so please send them in the chat and we will try and get to them. Please stick around after the webinar to find out about helpful tools and upcoming EC webinars. Now we go to Emily Pape, Senior Program Associate with the Electrification Coalition.
Thank you, Kyle. If we could bring up the slides. Excellent. So both federal and state funding opportunities are really setting the stage for more widespread electric school bus adoption across the United States. We have the EPA Clean School Bus Program, which is funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and it far surpasses any other single funding source for electric school buses. As of October, it was responsible for 67% of all electric school bus commitments, which translates into 8,125 buses. The fourth rebate round opened this September and it closes on January 9th. So that's just around the corner. We also have the EPA Clean Heavy Duty Program, which is funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. And it yesterday announced tentative awards for over $490 million in grants for zero-emission school buses and associated infrastructure. In all, 70 applicants were selected for more than $735 million in grants for over 2,400 zero-emission heavy-duty vehicles. And 70% of those selections that were announced will support the purchase of clean school buses. Both Boston Public Schools and St. Louis Public Schools are among the awardees, which is pretty cool to see. Finally, there's also the EPA Diesel Emissions Reduction Act program, and that one just recently closed its Tribal and Territory Grants program, and that is making approximately $9 million available to tribal and territory governments, as well as Alaska Native villages. While we're on this slide, I wanted to quickly address a couple of trending concerns that we've heard recently. One of them is about the future of that clean school bus program under the Trump administration. And while things are uncertain and this program doesn't have the same protections as other bipartisan infrastructure law funded programs like NEVI, EPA headquarters is mobilizing to ensure that funding for this program's final round in 2025 is provided to applicants. The second concern regards Lion Electric suspending its Joliet, Illinois operations. And there are always significant changes in any market when scaling up to the proportions that the United States is headed toward. The Clean School Bus Program alone is expected to invest $5 billion along with other programs that include, clean school buses in an otherwise really nascent market. In scaling up, the reality is that bus companies are still catering to the needs of each school district, which adds complexity to procurement processes. We are working to understand what the future impacts are going to be, but it is clear that there's a growing demand for clean school buses all across the United States. And it is unfortunate that the Joliet factory is suspending operations and laying off workers, but we really hope that Lion and others will find a solution to support the growing need for clean school buses across the country. Next slide, please. So on to the state side of things. State legislatures are really helping to accelerate the electric school bus transition by providing many cost matching opportunities. So here you can see a list of active state electric school bus programs. Some, like Michigan, Maryland, and New York, are currently accepting applications. And the links to those application websites are on this slide, and we'll be sure to share these slides after the webinar. We also have a couple of highlights surrounding electric school bus adoption targets and programs. Since 2022, 7 states, which are California, Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, New York, and Washington, have statutorily enacted zero-emission school bus transition requirements, which is great to see. Washington is the most recent state to enact its transition target, and they now require that 100% of new school bus purchases be zero emission as soon as that total cost of ownership is on par with that of diesel buses. Colorado, Michigan, and Washington, D.C. have non-binding transition goals. So we see Colorado aiming for 100% zero emission buses on the road by 2035. Michigan is shooting for 100% of school bus sales to be electric by 2030. And Washington, D.C. is working toward the replacement of 100% of school buses with electric models, and that process began in 2021. California has their hybrid and zero emission truck and bus voucher incentive project, and that is the next largest funding source after the EPA's Clean School Bus Program, and it has funded 1,213 bus commitments. Additionally, a significant amount of the state programs that we have listed here are funded by that Volkswagen Clean Air Act civil settlement, in addition to some state budget allocations, like Michigan has their Clean Bus Energy Grant Program. And then there are also other state, federal, or utility funding sources as well, such as Dominion Energy, Electric School Bus Infrastructure Program, and a couple of other ones. And then finally, Texas Clean School Bus Program is one of the oldest state programs that's still active today, dating back to 2007, so long ago now, I know. As of January 2024, the program has awarded more than $76 million in grants to replace or retrofit more than 8,000 buses in Texas, which we love to see. Now, back to you, Kyle.
Thank you, Emily, for getting us started with your excellent presentation. There are so many great funding programs available, and the $490 million just awarded by the EPA's Clean Heavy Duty Program is fantastic news. We know that engaging with your utility is a key part of the process, so we go now to Kyriakos Anastasopoulos, the Senior Programs Manager from ComEd. Take it away.
Thank you, Kyle. If we can go ahead and bring up the slides, please. All right, thank you. So really, first of all, thank you for having me here. Really excited to just share some of the great work that we've been doing and just how we're looking at electrification and what we're doing around it as a utility. So the plan for me today is to, one, just start by giving you guys some background into our beneficial electrification plan, talk about some of the goals and benefits of the plan, provide some detail around some programs and relevance to the audience here. And then finally, I'll just close it out by pointing out some of the tools that we have available that can be helpful in some of the decision-making purposes that you guys might have. We can move on to the next slide. So for some background, in September of 2021, Governor J.B. Pritzker signed into law the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act in Illinois. This was a comprehensive energy legislation and incentives renewable energy development plan. It accelerated EV adoption. And then with that, it also made amendments to the already existing Electric Vehicle Act, which included beneficial electrification provisions and required that electric utilities with over 500,000 customers set up beneficial electrification programs. Now, we submitted our 3-year beneficial electrification plan in July of 2022, and it was approved in March of 2023. Next slide. So the current BE plan aims to invest $231 million over 3 years. And with that, it's expected to eliminate up to 78 million gallons of fossil fuel, which is the equivalent of 420,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions. The plan consists of 3 rebate and incentive programs, a customer education awareness program, and a pilot program that has a goal of enabling and scaling pilots and EV technology demonstration projects. One would be very interesting to this group, and it's a V2G pilot program that we have for school buses. One thing to note here also is that our plan places a heavy focus on our EIC communities, which is basically our low-income, environmental justice, and restore, reinvest, and renew communities. Next slide. So the B plan offers 3 customer-facing programs. We offer a residential charging infrastructure program, a business and public sector EV purchase rebate program, and then a business and public sector make-ready rebate program. And it's the last 2 that are actually most relevant to this group here. Next slide. So this slide details the funding for our EV rebate program and how that's allocated by vehicle class. We have roughly 30 million annually, with approximately 6 million being specifically reserved for school buses. And that's either existing school buses and repowering them, or new school buses altogether. So requirements for the plan are that, for the program, are that vehicles are registered in the state of Illinois. Customers are required to be ComEd customers. And like with the other programs, that a majority of this funding is actually reserved for EIC communities. Next slide. So for customers that are interested in applying and how they would go about doing that, we actually have one of 2 ways. We have a point of sale network, which we work with dealers and suppliers, where if you purchase the vehicle through them, the rebate is taken off automatically at the point of purchase. And then the other way is, if you have purchased the vehicle and it's still relatively new, you can apply for a post-purchase rebate. Next slide. For those that are interested in installing charging infrastructure, so we offer a make-ready program where customers who are interested in installing level 2 or DC fast chargers can get a rebate for make-ready work associated with the installation of those chargers. For the general case, the program provides up to $5,333 per port for level 2 chargers for make-ready rebates with a limit of 10 ports. For direct current fast charging rebates, that is per kilowatt, which is $667 per kilowatt, and that has a limit of up to $500,000 per customer. For EIC communities, that's obviously higher, with level 2 being $8,000 per port, and DC fast chargers being $1,000 per kilowatt. Next slide. So I wanted to include this slide because I know that a lot of utilities include make-ready programs. I know that every time I talk about make-ready as well, from our perspective, is that we've always gotten questions on it, right? So I wanted to just kind of make clear what we consider make-ready. And what that is essentially is anything from the pole to the charger, to the charging stub. It does not include the charger, however. It does also include things like conduit, as well as panels and the labor associated with actually the installation of the chargers. Okay, next slide. So I just want to mention, a couple tools that the utilities, or at least our utility, is putting out there for customers to use. Um, for those that are really interested in electrifying their fleets, we provide a load capacity map. So depending on where you're located, this shows how much capacity is on that circuit, which may make it easier for you to electrify. And there's not a lot of, in those scenarios, there's not a lot of changes that's going to be needed to the local infrastructure to accommodate the additional capacity, and that should essentially make it cheaper for you to do so. Next slide. For those that are a little more interested, not to just a little more interested in electrification and have a general plan going forward, and have a fleet, or are curious and ready to invest in a fleet, we do have an EV fleet calculator. This is within our EV toolkit. We also, this calculator basically will allow you to understand just how much it's potentially going to cost for you to electrify your fleet, what's your GHG reduction, and ultimately what you can do is you can put in the type of plan that you have, and it will tell you, based on your operations, how much it will effectively cost you to operate this. And next slide. And finally, the last slide here is really for just those that are really looking to get started with electrification, and they've done kind of some of the initial homework. We have a fleet assessments process, which basically you can come to us and we can work with you to kind of dive into a little more of the details in terms of infrastructure that's required, and anything else that's related specifically to electrification of your fleet. So there's a couple different ways to do this. We have one version, which I already mentioned, which is a fleet calculator. And then we have the other ones where we have kind of a quick plan, which will give you the basics. And we have a more in-depth plan, which will take you up to a couple months to actually be able to do that. All these are essentially free for use. And next slide. So finally, the one thing I just want to call out is that if anyone is receiving any kind of state or federal funds for charging infrastructure, just to get in touch with us, feel free to reach out to our team at the Beneficial Electrification specifically. The website for that is ComEd Beneficial Electrification at ComEd.com, and we can point you to the right people there. For any other general questions, I would visit evsmart at ComEd.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyriakos, for that wonderful presentation. These are really helpful resources. Next, we will hear from Jane Israel, the Senior Western Regional Manager at Highland Electric Fleets, about the procurement process.
Thanks so much, Kyle. And thanks to the whole Electrification Coalition team for having me. As Kyle mentioned, my name's Jane and I'm with Highland Electric Fleets. In case you haven't heard of us, we're an electrification as a service provider. We partner with school districts and kind of help them with all aspects of the electrification process, from sort of planning to procurement, staff training, and then managed charging solutions. We bundle these services into a performance-based contract with annual fees that are typically at or below the existing transportation budget of a school district. Next slide, please. And next slide after that. Yeah, thank you. As Emily discussed, there's quite a bit of funding available for districts to electrify their fleets sort of across the country. Certainly applying for that funding makes a lot of sense. But I think equally important, and sort of what I'm going to be talking about today, is beginning to plan for your electrification approach, right? How are you going to utilize those funds, and kind of what types of partners will you need? Certainly, I echo ComEd's shout out to engage with the utility early. That is first and foremost the thing that you should do. But certainly, there's a lot of different stakeholders throughout this electrification process, and so making sure that you're engaging with those folks as you begin to plan is really critically important. Next slide, please. So for many of you, the beginning of the planning process is going to be really thinking through your budget. You know, you're going to start applying for grants, thinking through incentives, but you're going to need to start thinking about your CapEx and your OpEx costs associated with electrification. Right now, for many districts, right, you've got the expense of diesels, fuel, maintenance and repair associated with those vehicles, but you're not thinking about, you know, electrons, for example. And as your team starts looking at electrifying your fleet, there are going to be differing costs to consider. Your fueling costs, as I already mentioned, are going to come in the form of electrons instead of liquid fuel. That price of electricity varies significantly, both seasonally and then temporally during the day. So depending on what utility service territory you're in, there might be even time of use rates that you need to be considering when you're electrifying. You'll need software to ensure that you're getting the most efficient charge, and that you know, if there are any problems with the chargers, those are getting flagged to you. All of these sort of pieces take some coordination and some differing resources than what you know, have needed in the past, and might carry some risk, right? I will say with public-private partnerships like Highland, we try and help school districts sort of manage those differences. First and foremost, we manage technology risk. So if you're coordinating with a third party that has a performance-based contract, your school district is not taking on the risk of ownership and operation of the vehicles. That risk lies on the third party. Maintenance and fuel savings can also be factored into these types of partnerships to create more certainty in fleet operator than the fleet operator doing it by themselves. This kind of was famously done in the solar industry with power purchase agreements, but a similar model can apply to transportation electrification fleets. And we can also help, you know, you take advantage of tax credits and depreciation, looking out for grants and incentives to kind of lower that overall upfront cost and administrative burden to fleet operators, whose main job really, and I know Kenny will talk about this, is to ensure that buses are performing on their routes, students are getting delivered on time, and are being delivered safely to school on time every day and delivered home, right? That's first and foremost what folks need to be worried about. And so hopefully, you know, having a partner enables that to continue to be the primary focus. I think to that end as well, you know, Highland and other partners like us are responsible for operations and maintenance. So we can help to, you know, pay your technician staff for any time that they spend on the buses, and can guarantee bus performance. So all of these different things factored together can lead to a more cost competitive project that is actually below the cost of an existing diesel project, which is pretty exciting and is definitely something to consider. As we look to the next slide, and really this is just to kind of showcase kind of all of the different pieces of the puzzle that lead to a successful electrification deployment. And I know many of you are likely already beginning to start thinking about these different steps. These electrification projects aren't simple. They require detailed planning and many different stakeholders, as I already said, to get them up and running and over the finish line. And so it's really important to start this planning process as early as possible, to engage with those stakeholders as early as possible, so that you can sort of begin to address any sort of hurdles that you might have at your specific depot location. I know some of those tend to involve the utility first and foremost, especially if you have a number of buses that you're trying to deploy at a single spot. You need to begin thinking through, are you going to have to upgrade a substation? Are you going to have to think through, any sort of other maybe longer term upgrades? How can you do that so that you're not only thinking about your first deployment of maybe 1 or 2 buses, but you're thinking about your 5 bus deployment a couple years from now, your 10 bus deployment a couple years after that, so that you're not having to redredge parking lots after having just implemented a project a couple years prior, right? All of these things need to be taken into consideration, and certainly partnering with key stakeholders can help you get to that process a little bit more smoothly. The next slide, and I've already touched upon this a little bit, but I would highly, highly recommend as we implement projects sort of across the country, we do use a charge management software. I think this is a really key piece to ensuring that not only are your buses charged and ready to be on the routes that you've determined they should go on, but that they're also being charged at the right times of day. Having a charge management software enabled to do that will just make your life a lot easier, and will notify you if you have an issue with a charger, again enabling you to avoid any sort of circumstance where you get to your depot at 5 o'clock in the morning and find out that a bus wasn't charged overnight. Certainly don't want that. And there's a lot of things that charge management software can help just sort of alleviate those concerns. And then final thing that I'll touch upon in the next slide, I just wanted to quickly highlight that there's some really exciting opportunities with these particular types of buses, especially in the realm of resilience and grid reliability. And I say this as sort of a self-proclaimed energy nerd, but especially with school buses, which have relatively fixed routes and have long periods where they're idle, especially during the summer. There's real opportunities here for these vehicles to become community assets that can be used as really capacity assets for utilities to take advantage of. We're actively working, as the slide displays, with projects across the country on vehicle to grid and soon vehicle to building. Recently, we're actually awarded a GRIP application with 13 different projects and with like 10 different utility partners. So we're really excited to continue to delve into this arena and have seen in the projects that we've deployed to date some really beneficial outcomes for both the utility, Highland, and importantly, the school district as well, with school districts able to receive revenue that can go towards, hiring additional additional teachers, for example. So happy to speak more about that, but certainly I think this is an exciting realm of school bus electrification, but would echo everything that ComEd said and everything that the Electrification Coalition said as well. The funding is available now. It's an exciting time to take advantage of this school bus electrification process and deploy some of these buses. But thank you all, and please let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer them during the Q&A.
Thank you, Jane, for that great presentation. I agree. This is a great time to go electric, and stuff like vehicle to grid is really exciting. Next, we will hear from Kenny Jean Schrader, the Transportation Director for Three Rivers Community Schools, about the district's real-world experience in going electric.
My apology. Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate the opportunity to join all of you today and speak a little bit about what real world looks like at this point. My name is Kenny Jean Schrader. I'm the Transportation Director for Three Rivers Community Schools. And in this slide, you can see my assistant Kelly and I, who without her and her support wouldn't have been possible for me to participate in events such as this and to be able to make our electric school bus program a success. Next slide, please. Three Rivers Community Schools. We began our electrification of our fleet back in 2016, but I won't take you back that far. But we received our buses in December of 2019. It's kind of incredible to believe that in just 1 week, it will be 5 years since we have received our buses. We deployed our buses in January of 2020, which when you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to put an electric school bus out for the first time in Michigan in January. But we did it. So the great thing is that it's an exciting time to be part of such an incredible journey and what we have been doing the same way for 100 years. Our electric school buses have provided our students a much safer environment, which they can learn. It gives them a better opportunity to have a better day at school, a more comfortable ride home, and feel very safe. I will say that starting our project, it was a, what do you think of this idea? And then, you know, the first thing that we've heard today is engage your utility, because where you decide to park these buses at your facility is going to be a driving factor on if there's going to be an investment on the side of the district. So the planning ahead is extremely crucial. What we did is we met with our utility partners every 2 weeks, whether it be on site or virtually, from the concept of our program until probably just about 1.5 years ago. So keeping that partnership going is going to be extremely important. Next slide, please. So another important factor that we considered when we deployed our buses is you have to engage your community. We had an event where we brought in our towing company, so that when you know, if a bus were to become disabled, that everybody from our first responders to our towing company, that they all knew how to manage the vehicle. We put the buses up on a lift, we did a walk around, we did a drive along. So keeping those community partners engaged regularly, because as we know, they also have staff turnover as well, is important. Next slide, please. So we are in Michigan. It does get cold in Michigan. We have dirt roads in Michigan, and you know, I've often heard that, you know, my routes are too long, or the buses can't go down the roads that we traverse. Well, with careful planning, they can. It's very important to consider how you're going to apply the buses on the routes that you want to deploy them. What we did is with our first 2 buses, we put one on a very rural route including the dirt roads, and then one in more of an urban setting, in-town setting, where they pick up a lot of students at group stops, which was very important because we wanted to make sure that we were making a difference for those students who were standing out at the bus stops waiting for their bus every day. So our rural route last year, she ran 100 miles a day. That's a morning route and an afternoon route. Our buses are at a range of 125 miles. Our in-town route was basically about 50 miles a day. We didn't see much difference in the outcomes of those two different applications, but I just wanted to make sure that we were serving both communities equally. Next slide, please. So this this is a picture of the first two chargers that we had installed. They are level 2 chargers. They have served us very well. Our buses are parked outside. So what we have learned is in part of the learning process is that, okay, buses are parked outside. It gets cold. It freezes, it thaws, it freezes. And what happens is the charger freezes to the bus. So there are some learning curves that each district is going to have to work through individually to navigate some of the challenges, but don't worry, because there are groups like the coalition, like your utility partners, and myself and other districts who have previously deployed electric buses to be able to help you on your journey. So don't feel that you would have to tackle on this project all by yourself. There are those before you. Next slide, please. So when some considerations came up when we were looking at a new transportation facility, and knowing that this is the direction that Three Rivers wanted to move in forward, that, okay, what can we do to make our facility better and more equipped to expand our fleet? So some things that we thought of: let's make our parking spaces a little bit wider. Let's make sure, because the buses are heavy with the batteries. So let's just make sure that we have that substrate reinforcement in our service bays of our garage and in our parking area. Let's make our doors a little bit wider. Let's take advantage of all of these things while we can. And what we did is we moved our two current chargers. We had 2 more chargers installed. We had a total of infrastructure for up to 20 electric school buses in place. So everything is in place. All of the conduit is ran. The charging poles are in place. So as we expand our fleet, what we'll do is we'll connect our wires, and it'll be basically a plug and play. We had all of our electrical panels outfitted to be ready to go. With that being said, we are receiving 2 more electric buses, hopefully first quarter of 2025, and we're going to be applying for another 4. And that is working on a fleet of right now of 24 buses. Next slide, please. I'm having a hard time seeing that, but I'll continue to talk. So things to think about. You're going to have your route analysis to do. You are going to have driver training. You're going to have technician training. But today there are so many, again, great partners through your OEMs, through your utility partners, partners such as Highland Electric that are there to help and support you to make your journey a success. It's different. There are going to be learning curves. It is different. If you have a technician who's been a diesel mechanic, heavy duty equipment mechanic for 20 years, transitioning that person into more of a technology based service industry is going to be different. You know, electric school buses have 70% less moving parts than an internal combustion engine vehicle does. There's going to be a lot less time spent on your maintenance. You don't have the fluid changes that you do with an internal combustion engine. So there's a lot of cost savings that are going to be involved from a preventive maintenance and repair perspective. We do have diesel heaters on our buses. We were not sure how they were going to perform in Michigan. And when I say we got our buses in 2019, there were 45 electric school buses in the entire country. And most of those were in California. And today there are about 12,000 that are committed throughout the country. So not knowing how ours were going to perform, we did opt for the small diesel auxiliary heater, which what that does is it keeps the batteries at a warmer temperature. So I can tell you that our electric buses have a better starting rate when it's 10 degrees below zero than our internal combustion engine buses do. They're very reliable. We do burn some diesel, we do, but when I do the analysis of our 2 electric buses, it is less than $100 a year, fluctuating on what the cost of the commodity is at the time, but we don't utilize that unless we absolutely have to, and it becomes necessary. So I always say, I know we're gearing towards zero emission, but to not let perfect get in the way of the good. Next slide, please. When we received our electric buses, there's always a state inspection that has to be done on every school bus across the country. Well, in Michigan, nobody had any idea how to perform a state inspection or what was required or what we needed to do. So I share this because this is a form that I created so that drivers can differentiate the difference between pre-tripping and an ICE bus or an EV bus. And I did it on yellow paper because wanted to make sure they grabbed the right pre-trip form as they were walking out the door. And this helps me to gather the data that I need, what beginning and ending mileages of each route, what was the charge at. So that really helps me to maintain a record of how our buses are performing and what cost savings the district is actually benefiting. With that, next slide, please. So I do record our efficiencies every month, and I do want to share that, as I said, that we received our buses in January of 2020. We haven't quite seen the outcomes that we had expected because the country shut down in March. So we're probably a little bit behind where a district who's been operating for a full 5 years would be. Nonetheless, it's pretty important. So this is my November report. Both buses ran for 18 days. Our average temperature was 42 degrees. I always keep track of what sort of maintenance and repair was done. Again, with that diesel heater, what we've learned is that it does need to be cleaned. And by cleaned, I mean the technician brings the bus in, opens up the chamber, uses the air compressor, blows it out, and closes it, and he's done. It's about a 15-minute procedure per bus, and we do that generally in the colder months when we're operating that auxiliary heater about once a month. We track our mileage, how many kilowatts that bus used, as Jane pointed to the data recording, what those approximate diesel costs would be based on current value, market value, and then what the savings is to the district. So I track that monthly, I track it annually, and then I also have a year-to-date total. So for year-to-date in fuel alone, that our buses have saved our district $41,727. I also track our environmental impact, which was very important to us because we wanted to make sure that we are making a difference for the students that we serve. So I'll just skip to year-to-date with our mileage. An internal combustion engine bus would discharge 191.1 metric tons of tailpipe emission. Our EV buses in our 5 years have discharged 60.1 metric tons with a savings of 131 metric tons. To me, that's pretty powerful when you're speaking about communities and what we can do for children who are struggle with asthma or any sort of respiratory problem that are on buses, and sometimes on buses for more than an hour. I'm very, very thrilled to be part of a movement that is really driving a change for what we do for the future of our kids. Next slide, please. With that, my name is Kenny Jean Schrader. I'm the Transportation Supervisor Director for Three Rivers Community Schools. I look forward to speaking with you, answering questions, anything I can do to help you on your journey as well. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Kenny Jean, for sharing your experience and advice. Early adopters in a cold environment, that was great. Thank you for leading the way. And thank you to all of our wonderful speakers. Today has been really informative. Now, if you have any questions for any of our speakers today or for the whole group, if you could put those in the chat, we'll try and answer them. I see one question here about process or experience from any of the panelists regarding speaking with school administrators in their move to electric school buses.
I would be happy to share, Kyle.
That'd be great.
Can you hear? Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
That was tough for us. It was what we really need to focus on, and what I would really suggest to districts is utilize the services that we have. We have the Electrification Coalition. You have your utility. You have partners such as Highland Fleet. Reach out to them. Gather your data. Take them the facts. And with the opportunities with the EPA heavy duty that we have to make a difference now is incredible. And that you can basically almost get an electric school bus for free. which, because it includes your infrastructure or part of your infrastructure there, we had pole to the charger. We had 100 investment. We had $125 per bus the district invested. We didn't have the opportunities that we have like we do through the EPA. Right now, Michigan has the Clean School Bus Grant. Take advantage of that. And use your partners, do your homework.
I would echo what Kenny Jean just said, and just double down on really understanding what the key issues are for your school board, because they vary, right, state by state. So for certain school districts, the message is going to be, the message that's going to resonate most is budget oriented, right? Being able to display the types of cost savings that Kenny Jean has been able to display is impactful. Comparing diesel costs to the cost of electricity is impactful depending on where you are. So maybe that's the story. The other story that I think resonates a lot, and is certainly a story that we really like to tell at Highland, is the emissions reduction story. It's also the air quality and a student health story as well, right? Diesel buses are emitting particulate matter that is a leading cause of pediatric asthma amongst students. As Kenny Jean had said, some of these students are driving on these buses, or riding on these buses. They're not driving them, riding on these buses for over an hour a day. And so they're experiencing this emissions every single day. So reducing that, improving their health, leads to long-term improvements in their health as they enter adulthood. All of these things are sort of part and parcel of the reason why school bus electrification is so important for communities across the country. But really, I would suggest thinking about what story is going to resonate most for your school board, because we see, as we work with school districts across the country, that it kind of varies depending on what the priorities are. But certainly folks are always happy to help provide those examples.
Thank you so much. It is very inspiring. One final question before we conclude. If you could, for the whole panel, if you could weigh in on any lessons learned in terms of coordination with utilities, that would be great.
I'm happy to go
I'll
first.
go.
Or yeah,
go ahead,
for it.
Jane.
No, go for it. You first, Kenny.
That is one of your key relationships. Because when we began our journey, my power company, American Electric Power, had virtually no connection with school bus electrification, and there in our area, very little vehicle, passenger vehicle electrification. So it was a learning journey for both of us. And we really worked through the what ifs together and engaged, everyone from our account manager to engineers to, oh gosh, I wish I could remember. There were like 6 people from the power company involved in our meetings. Their marketing team, they are so key to you being successful, because if those plans are not integrated properly, you may not see the success that's potential or that you deserve.
I would just echo that and say, engage early engage often, and really let your utility know. I think I already alluded to this in my presentation, but let your utility know not only what you're planning on electrifying, say you apply for this open round of EPA, not only what you're planning on electrifying now, but what you're hoping to do in year 5, in year 10, because that helps them manage that overall process, and can lead to cost savings for you as the school district, and really can make sure it's a more successful implementation project. So yes,
Absolutely,
engage
Ab-
often.
Absolutely, Jane. Include them in your long-term fleet replacement plan.
Exactly.
Thank you. We actually do have one more question. Gabriel asked, I'm curious what you've seen on the grid connection side of vehicle to grid, specifically how transformers and switchgear considerations play into those project rollouts. Are most conventional transformers able to backfeed from bus batteries to the grid? Are there specific safety, efficiency, or durability concerns in handling the cycling and load fluctuations inherent in vehicle to grid?
That's a great question. I think at this point in time, we're still really early in really trying to understand what vehicle to grid looks like. I know that, and I mentioned this earlier, we're starting to look at pilot programs specifically for that. We actually have a pilot program that's going to be launched in Q1 of next year. So I'd say we're still early to really understand like what are the total impacts from vehicle to grid. And I would like to say that our transformers can handle a lot of those things. But you know, it pretty much devils in the details when you get out there and actually do it, and then you can really figure out like what's working and what's not.
And we haven't had any issues with the particular transformers when we've deployed these types of vehicle to grid projects and we have in Colorado, Massachusetts, and Vermont, and soon to be Maryland as well. We haven't had issues, but I think would echo the devil's always in the details. I would think specifically for school districts, a critical detail of that is, the relationship that you want to have with the utility, with whatever partner you're working with to deploy that technology. You want to make sure that the buses are going to serve their primary function, which of course is delivering students to and from school every single day. And so having a really detailed conversation with the utility on when they can take advantage of calling those assets is really, really, really important. So again, maybe it goes back to the previous question we just had on engaging with your utility. I would say also engage with a experienced partner, because there are complexities to vehicle to grid that sort of need ironed out when you're deploying that type of technology. It's not crazy, not insurmountable, but certainly adds a layer of complexity to any project.
Amazing. Thank you to all of our speakers for your wonderful presentations. These are really insightful, actually very inspiring as we go down this new path, and covered everything from funding opportunities, utility resources, procurement, and of course, deployment. Thank you to the audience for being here with us today. We will send you an email in the next few days with a link to the recording. We will have more webinars in the next year. Please feel free to stay on afterwards to see more info about that. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.